The year is 2009. A Japanese company called FromSoft has just released a game called Demon's Souls. The game did great, all things considered. Then Sony president Shuhei Yoshida called it, quote, an unbelievably bad game. Originally, it was not planned to be released in the Western video game market at all. But half a year later, it was released in the West anyway. The game got high praise from critics and became a cult classic. It wasn't quite the global phenomenon that later FromSoft games would be, but it got a decent following of dedicated fans who loved the game for its difficulty, its obscure lore, and its competitive multiplayer. The servers were originally planned to shut down in 2011, 2 years after release, but they were kept up indefinitely, only shutting down in 2018. Then, on June 11, 2020, the Demon's Souls Remake was announced. A launch title and system seller of the PlayStation 5, Sony now put a lot of expectation into this game. In contrast to the original, it was released worldwide to even greater critical acclaim. Bluepoint Games, a studio known for their remakes, headed the project alongside Japan's studio, who assisted with the original. The game kept its difficulty for the most part, alongside the obscure lore, but updated the graphical fidelity to new levels. In this video, I want to talk about the process that makes these newer games so different from the original. What makes them so modern and current gen, but also what they may have lost in the process. And I'd love to talk about all of it, the entire process of reimagining a game, but I can't. I don't have the skill set or knowledge or experience to talk about every facet of video game development, but I can talk about music. Let's talk music. But first, an introduction. Hi, I'm Rinke. I'm a composer and sound designer from the Netherlands. I graduated from the Prins Claus Conservatoire in Groningen, was nominated for a European Talent Award at Soundtrack Cologne last year, and I just like to make beeps and boops for games and films. I've been a huge fan of video games and specifically FromSoft games for a while now. The idea to look at remakes came when I started listening to the Demon's Souls remake soundtrack and noticed just how different it is from the original. So, let's get into it. Let's listen to Demon's Souls. This is the track Tower Knight from the remake. It is, simply put, really, really good. It's imposing and bombastic, the live orchestra being put to excellent use. The choir is shouting at me, towering over me like the little worm I am, dying over and over again to this boss. The strings, the raspy brass, all of it performed, recorded, and mixed to perfection. And then we compare it to the original. It sounds like a joke. The singers are literally laughing at me. It's thin, empty, it doesn't have the overpowering percussion that the remake has. It sounds worse. And before you get mad at me in the comments for saying this, I'll get back to this point, so please watch the rest of the video first, then you're free to get mad at me. This relatively obscure game from 2009 has a strong musical legacy, with Demon's Souls being the progenitor of a lot of Souls-like soundtracks. It's remarkable then to look at the original or earlier entries and compare how different the music sounds to the newer versions. Maybe it's just technological improvements. Maybe it's changing tastes. Realistically, it's both. But whichever one it is, there's no denying that a remake fundamentally differs from the original, even in its soundtrack. I want to illustrate the process of reimagining a soundtrack, and to do that, we're gonna do a little thought experiment. Let's imagine a world where I was hired to write the soundtrack for the next FromSoft game. What would it even be? FromSoft is at the top of the world right now. Shadow of the Erdtree is the highest rated DLC of all time, beating out The Witcher 3's DLCs. They could do whatever they want. Elden Ring 2? Sure. More Armored Core? Why not? Bloodborne remake? Probably not. Sekiro sequel? Sure as shit possible. But what if we looked even further? What if we went back to the past? Shadow Tower was a game released in...
Game doesn't have a soundtrack. What? Shadow Tower doesn't have a soundtrack. Well, it does, but it's like 7 minutes long, and most of it's from the multiplayer. Huh. Okay. Guess we're not talking about that then. Oh well.
Kingsfield is a game released by FromSoft, at that time a small company focused on productivity software, in 1994. It was FromSoft's first actual game release, a dark fantasy action-adventure game. In it, you explore the catacombs of a medieval fantasy land plagued by monsters. Sounds familiar? It's gonna sound even more familiar in a second. In the second game of the series, Kingsfield 2 from 1995, your goal is to find the Moonlight Sword, capable of slaying the dragon's Seath. Yeah, they've been working with that for a while. It is a game that, graphically, does not really hold up, even with mods. If a new Kingsfield was released today, it would need a serious overhaul in terms of everything. Graphics, gameplay, design, sound. But before we can talk about what Kingsfield might sound like in 2025, we need to talk about what it sounded like in 1995. It sounds dated. The technology of the 1995 PlayStation was, for its time, pretty advanced, with the possibility to stream audio from the disc, but also MIDI capability, and 24 channels of audio. But almost 30 years later, and we laugh at that, 24 channels for both music and sound design? I've made sound effects with more channels than that. And the sounds of sampled instruments these days are almost indistinguishable from real recordings, a far cry from these low bitrate orchestral hits. And speaking of samples, is that a slap bass? No, this won't do. We will have to drastically change all of this. I think my version sounds very good, but there's one problem with it. It doesn't sound like Kingsfield.
Sounds like a joke. The singers are literally laughing at me. It's thin, empty. It doesn't have the overpowering percussion that the remake has. It sounds worse.
The original Demon's Souls soundtrack has a very unique sound. Recorded with only a small ensemble of live musicians and layered samples, it offers a sparse and desolate sound that feels more like a Baroque consort than the late romantic O Fortuna style orchestra of the remake. But it's a sound that worms its way into your ear and stays there. In a way, it's like the Souls games themselves. At first, they're off-putting and hard to get into. There's a staying power in them, something that keeps you hooked. What's more, the sound of the original Demon's Souls is unique. I don't think there's any game that sounds anything like it, except maybe parts of Dark Souls 1. The remake, however, as good as it sounds, I've heard that sound all over the place. Earlier, I called that soundtrack perfection. But what if in the process of creating that perfection, all the rough edges that made Demon's Souls so unique got polished away? When it comes to Kingsfield, I don't know if my approach necessarily did it justice. Making Kingsfield sound like an Elden Ring B-side would be kinda boring. It would just be more of the same. We don't want that. We want our newly rebooted game to have its own identity. Kingsfield is gloomy in a way that only the PlayStation 1 and 2 can create. There's this haziness to the music, similar to games like Silent Hill. The things that mark them as products of their time are also the things that make it unique. And it is hard to replicate that in the modern day without faking. I don't have the hardware. So I took a different approach. I blended retro synths, in my case NES emulation, don't sue me, with modern organic and orchestral sounds. This way, it's not just a modern Souls soundtrack, it's something that tries to link the present to the past. My approach is closer to a game like Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening Remake, which takes the samples and synth sounds of the original and combines it with playful live instruments. There's a great video on that by 8-Bit Music Theory that I highly recommend. Arranging it this way maintains the low poly feel of the original, but it still sounds modern and personal. In the end, you might prefer one approach over the other, or you might even not like either. Ultimately, it comes down to taste. For my part, I really enjoyed writing both styles, so it's been a very fun project for me. If you're interested in more of a deep dive tutorial of how I made both of these tracks, I'm working on that, so stay tuned. And of course, please like and subscribe. Do people still say that? I feel so old. And look at the other music on my channel. I'm a composer. I do the music thing. Take care.